So, of everybody who's here, what's your area of expertise? Are you like looking at voice from a B2C perspective or a B2B perspective? So I guess B2B, if you want to put your hands up. And then B2C. Okay, it's a pretty even mix. It's not bad. So a quick background to us. Some of you I recognized from the room earlier today, but basically our business is focused on trying to help brands use voice as a way to connect directly with consumers. And part of that process was looking initially for some businesses at how we can sell through this platform. Obviously, that's the context of this discussion right now. I think in summary, which we can talk through, and perhaps maybe some questions and conversation might be a better way to do it, but overall, in a B2C environment, I don't think you should use voice as a way to try and sell right now, is the simple summary of where we're at the moment. I think you can use conversational interface to help drive a sale in maybe at the point of purchase, so maybe in retail or online, and that could be bot-based or voice-based, as in helping people make the right purchase decision. But as it stands, I don't think it's an awareness tool that people suddenly come upon and then start buying your products. I think it's about using a conversation to help you work out what's right for you and then make a decision on what you should buy. That's going to change a little bit, though, with the introduction of screens from Google and Amazon over the next period. I think that's going to be quite interesting. But it's much harder to find ROI and a reason to do a B2C voice experience if you're trying to drive sales right now and prove back to your business that you can generate more revenue right now, is the honest truth. But I think it's quite different from your experience, right, in B2B?
Yeah. What we're seeing is people are saying, here's this great tool, I love it, why doesn't it do X? And so again, the reason, and again, I'm with a company called Agile Audio Dashboards. We like to say we do secure, scalable voice skills for B2B only, Alexa only. By the way, I was in here earlier for Catherine's speech on the Google stuff. Was anybody here for that? Good insight. She basically said that voice for search is based on good SEO. And to me, that's the big difference between Alexa. Alexa is a complete ecosystem that allows me to make money today. If you're a B2B, if you're a SaaS, okay, we want to come in and partner with you. We want to do all the dev work. You've got a great product. You need to extend your rate card because you've already got sales. The easiest way, there's a great book out there by the former head of Tandy Radio Shack, Louis Kornfeld. The title of the book is, If You Want to Catch a Mouse, Make a Noise Like a Cheese. Think about that. So, great lessons in there, but one of which is when sales go crazy and they're wild and the door's not big enough, he said, knock the wall down and make a door. That's what I think we're seeing in the next 6 months in the B2B space. People want great skills. They want to extend the rate card, and we want to do the dev and split the revenue with them. So that's what we do and what we're excited about.
I guess, given the context of the room, what might be good is from a B2B side and then maybe a B2C side, get some questions from the audience in terms of what you're looking to do, and from our experience, if we can give you advice or relevant context to that. So from my side, at the moment, we're building B2C experiences for Nike, Estee Lauder, Moët Hennessy, that are trying to develop this one-to-one relationship with customers. Is there anyone in the room who's got a question around how you're thinking of approaching voice, or some experiences you've had already that perhaps I can add some context to, or a bit of learnings back to you from our side? Anyone brave enough to ask a question on it?
So how do you create a relationship with people, consumers, and Moët Hennessy through voice?
Yeah, sure. So from Moët to Nike to Estee, it's all about, at the moment, trying to work out how to drive some value exchange for a user. So it comes from the context of people don't like advertising, and as a result are using ad blockers or VPNs or are paying subscription services to avoid advertising. It's getting harder for brands to access people and have some sort of relationship with them. And we had this thing happen in Europe recently, which was GDPR, which I think you're probably all familiar with. But if you're not, it was basically super tight regulations from the European Union that said that you can't just spam people with email anymore. And obviously, just before the deadline, a massive wave of emails went out, and you had to basically re-sign up to say, yeah, it's fine to spam me. One of my colleagues, whose company I won't mention, he could address 60% of his audience base through email pre-GDPR, and he had 0.6% access after GDPR, which shows that people don't like the content he's producing for them, and also that's probably not a great way to manage your relationships. So what we're trying to do is move away from the pre-purchase component of a relationship between a brand and a consumer, and move into the post-purchase. So look at things like loyalty, but by doing that, we need to create a reason and a value that enables you to interact with that brand. So for Nike, for example, we've created a running coach that's focused on non-runners or lapsed runners, and we're trying to use a personalized conversational experience to understand your preferences that are bespoke to you, and then build you a program to get you from your sofa out running your first 5K. And it starts in voice, but it's going to move across lots of different touch points. So it will include Facebook Messenger. Right now we're integrating into Nike.com. So once you're signed in, it's going to remember you from the assistant experience or the Amazon Alexa experience, as well as what you're doing, plus what you've purchased, and start to become more relevant. So the way that should be really nice is, let's say I run every Sunday morning. We should be able to reach you through notifications on a Friday and say, hey, it's going to rain on Sunday. Do you want to move your run to Saturday? And if you say no, we can ask you if you want to talk about work with a running gear that we can have delivered to your house by Saturday evening. And that's where I think we can start to be more interesting and more relevant, rather than spamming any and everyone about the latest running shoe, most of whom are not interested in that, for example. Does that answer the...
You're like, well, they already bought it, so let's just please them. With the post-purchase, how do you make the value of that? What is the engagement of that? And how is that effective? Because it seems like it's still in its infancy in so many ways.
Yeah, 100%. It is in its infancy, that's for sure. And your first question was, how are you going to get people to get into this? Well, you don't do it all at once. You do it small increments. You do one thing, you do it well, and you help people do that. And then you earn permission. Like, most people didn't jump straight into internet banking. You had to earn trust, and there had to be a genuine value exchange in that. And taking an advertising mentality into voice is not going to work, because people don't want to be talked at, they want to talk with you. That's the big difference that's going to stop a lot of conventional ad agencies even begin to work out how to create these type of experiences for their brands.
You say it's you're advertising for that. You're just doing it in a different way. But
Yeah, that's...
you're accomplishing it.
It's true, but to get to that, you have to earn the respect from the customer. And if we overstep the mark in what we do, people will stop talking to you and never come back. So that's what's kind of cold and cutthroat about voice and messaging, which I like, because it means you have to respect the customer, whereas in advertising, traditionally, you don't. But your second question, sorry, was about... I've forgotten. Your second question you moved into...
Measurability, right?
Yeah.
So you're in a meeting and they go, okay, great, we love it, it's so cool, but how are you increasing loyalty this way? How do you measure the impact of this?
Sure. Okay, so previously I did product and brand marketing for Samsung, and I can tell you from my experience, it cost me 10 times as much to attract a new customer to buy from me once the first time than it cost me to get someone who's bought from me to buy once already to buy the second time. And I don't know the answers yet. Of course, it's still an emerging platform, and voice is a part of that, but there has to be a bigger response to the problem that brands have where they can't access customers through conventional advertising because it is in decline. More money is being thrown at it, but less and less response is coming from it. So I don't know what the answer is for discoverability for brands right now, and I'm interested in exploring it. I think maybe if you look at search and what might happen with Google search and Amazon search and how you start to get a assistant response in that space in the next 6 months, that might be an interesting discoverability thing. But for now, it's not the place to play for voice and messaging. I think the opportunity is you provide a utility that sits above the product or service that you're offering. So if you're a diaper brand, you should be providing support for new parents around hygiene for the baby rather than trying to sell diapers. And then ideally you earn trust and it's easy to reorder what you've already bought. That's the logic. It's not proven, it's not tested. But I'm confident from my experience that it's easier to make that second sale than it is to get the first. And that's where I think getting that data back into your business is going to provide the insight.
Can I throw 2 cents in there? One thing about notification. One of the things that I've experienced as I present this to a lot of people over the last 9 months is everyone says, I don't want one more notification. I don't need Alexa fighting for my attention with my phone, my secretary, the dog, the whatever. And so I hear Amazon's working on some new notifications. It's our intent not to do anything with them. We just see that as wrong. We're excited that Alexa devices has no GPS. So if your play about making money is based off of GPS stuff, we think it's a bad play. We think it's going to change the world, but we're looking at you all to come up with the next killer app for voice, just like Flipboard did for the iPad. We're looking for it, and my partner Tom and I would be happy to code it.
So within voice, it's really difficult to design something that has no visual cue points. But I'm not the only person who's going to be talking about this throughout yesterday and the next couple of days. But voice is a great input, but it's not a great output. And that's just the reality of how our brains work. So the way we approach these designs when we start thinking about how to create a voice experience is to create a very narrow domain that you're going to own. And then how you convey that domain to the user is critically important when they first get onboarded, or how you make them aware of the existence of the skill. So we created something 2 years ago, I guess, when Facebook first ever talked about releasing bots. We got some early access, and we kind of had to play with it in the office and created a dinosaur that you could talk to, basically, named after one of our interns called Tina. And this dinosaur was kind of fun. We basically trained it on anything dinosaur related so it could answer any questions that you might have. But what we hadn't anticipated is like the breadth of questions people might ask that are outside of the domain that we had trained Tina to answer questions in. So that taught us really early on that you need to, in your first interaction with a customer or a user that enters this experience, you need to set their framework of what, set the parameters of which the domain is going to own for them, so they know what it will do and what it won't do. That isn't an extensive list of all the functionality, but it's being very specific to do one job, doing it really, really well, and making it clear to them what it will do for them. That way, if you hit a failed state, like someone in the Nike running coach asks what Kim Kardashian did last week, it's clear that it's not going to know. I think the other thing to think about is the personality of the experience. Like, it can't be functional, dry, and pure utility based. I mean, it's useful if you're like ordering an Uber or reordering a pizza or something. But I think there's a bigger opportunity for brands to have a sort of tone of voice and a relationship with some characteristics that become familiar. And setting that out at the beginning also helps if it has human attributes, but it's clearly not human. So having some sort of cartoon type figure or having some sort of character that you create, that means that people's expectations are not confused with, why can't this answer things like a human? It likes the human, people like the human attributes and some jokes or quips, but they don't expect a full spectrum of responses that you'd expect from a human. So that's how we begin to approach things. There's also some software that's free and available that you can use to play with to start to think about this, which is what scriptwriters use to try and write screenplays and narratives called Twilio. And that's a pretty good tool to just play around with and start creating conversational flows and try and work out how you're going to start answering different questions from people.
What was the name of that company?
I think it's Twilio or Twilio.
Twilio.
That's it, Twilio.
Yeah, amazing company, amazing product, amazing API.
So when you're referring to monetization here, it seems that you're still talking about selling physical goods for the existing brands and companies through these voice assistants. do you see interest for digital contents or premium contents and monetization through that? For example, I'm thinking of an example on the fly here, but the Nike Coach that you were referring to, do you see an opportunity where Nike Coach is a paid subscription that you buy through Alexa, and then it gives you instructions and coaches you throughout your experience?
You've probably got ideas in the B2B spectrum, but I'll shoot first with an idea around maybe content is an interesting space. So if you think about like The Economist or the New York Times, that's basically going to be digital content fundamentally, either through audio or visual, that you're going to read through an app or an experience. I think there's a lot of functionality that Alexa and Google are bringing, which is interesting because it's going to maybe allow a little bit of a taste of what's available to you as a customer of that kind of digital service or content, be that music, film, or editorial, and then allow you to have a better experience or a different experience once you've gone through a paywall. So I think there's going to be a lot of functionality that's available from Alexa and Google to enable that. It's just how to let customers have a taste and understand, A, how the content of whatever it is, be that media or editorial, is relevant and interesting to them, and B, how it fits in with their life and isn't an additional thing that they don't need. So, for example, The Economist, it would be great if it realized I was really interested in politics in the Middle East, and I was unaware of it as a publication before, if I could become aware of that, but also the fact that they do everything in audio, and I could listen to it on my commute to work every day. That suddenly makes it easier for me not just to be interested in the content, but also the delivery of the content that suits my lifestyle. So I think that with a subscription paywall, how you give people a taste and then move them across is a thing to look at.
Yeah, I would just also add that I mentioned in my session earlier, Sonny will back me up, I mentioned that a year from now we'll probably have a conference on nothing but in-skill purchasing for Alexa. Just like the iPhone exploded when we had apps, and I remember watching the keynote when Tim said we gave back last year over $1 billion to developers. So when I speak monetization, I'm always talking about money in my pocket. And so in-skill purchasing is going to be huge. Again, Amazon knows something about e-commerce, the way the model works, and it was just enabled on May 3rd. So we don't have a skill yet that does it. We're working on it. But you can do trials. You can do a 30-day trial, a 3-month trial, a year trial before people have to pay. It's really going to open up, I think, the floodgates, at least on the B2B side. And like you just mentioned, I see that as a B2C with Nike and others. The fact that, I want some premium service, and I'm willing to pay for it.
Yeah, I think also Prime Day that Amazon just did with their whole drive around like the Cube, Fire Cube, and thinking about TV and streaming services. I think there's going to be some interesting stuff there that enables you to look at, depending on what kind of services you're talking about in the digital space, the visual component that you need to be thinking about now with TV screens being a part of a voice experience and the screens in the kitchen or moving onto your phone. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity. It's quite fertile ground, but none of it's worked out yet.
Counterpoint. I could care less about screen. It's handy, but I'm driving down the road every day with Alexa at my side. I don't have time to look at the screen. So it's going to be big, but I think voice without screen is still going to be many times larger because it just helps me get done what I need to.
Other questions?
Yeah, trying to remember my slides. Sonny probably remembers them better. But I think there's 4 areas. You can be an Alexa dev inside a company, which we think that's going to work for a few people. What we are is we're an Alexa dev for people that don't want to get in that space. We're working on a framework. Our first skill should be live this past Monday, but it's not. We're using a PHP background, a back processing engine in PHP, because we can't find enough Node.js programmers. So now we have the ability to recruit PHP programmers. So if you want to develop either as your own company or you want to subcontract for us, that's another way. Another way to monetize is what we call TPAs, third-party affiliates. Okay, we've got a guy who does voiceovers. He'll do your podcast for you. He'll make all this great content that you don't have time to do. So he was already in that space. He's doing book trailers. So here's one more venue for him. I remember I spoke a few years ago in Austin, and they were asking, should my business have an app? Okay, Tom and I go back when they were asking us, should we have a website? Yes. Should you have an app? Yes. Today you ought to have a flash briefing. Somebody might listen. You might promote it. And people can put an in-skill purchase inside a custom flash briefing so that you can monetize it. And we're rolling one of those out. Our private letter, insights from us, we're going to charge a lot of money for. We give away a podcast free every day, but if you want insight, pay us for it. So whatever you're excited about, whatever you're passionate about, there's a way to turn that, I think, into money. And I'm happy, reach out to me. My Twitter handle is consultski. Reach out. I'm happy to have conversations. If you got a skill in the store, we'd love to help market it for you. So we don't know all the answers. It's evolving so fast. But number one thing, find a payer source. My wife's a nurse, and she says she can't do any health care unless there's a payer source. And I love the lean canvas for that from the lean startup. Find a payer source and figure out how you can monetize it for you.
In the B2C space, I don't think there's, while it's exclusively voice, I think it's going to be really hard to sell stuff through an experience. And that's not coming from me. Jeff Bezos' point of view was in some Billboard interview that he did probably like 3 months ago, said that voice exclusively is a very hard place to sell through. So once screens become a part of that journey, I think it will be easier for people to start making a decision as a feedback from the voice input.
And neat thing about screens, if you don't have a Fire HD tablet, I love the 8-inch. They keep announcing new stuff for it. When it shipped, it did not have Alexa built in. Or no, it didn't have hands-free. Now it does. They just added show mode. So the 8-inch Fire tablet now will emulate a show device. Again, he is a very smart man. Well, he's not perfect. Somebody, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, when we talk about advertising, it's a lot of ads on home devices. But what about interactive audio ads? Interacting with your voice. Is that anything your clients have thought about or talked about?
So whenever a brand comes to talk to us and asks how can they activate with voice, they're basically, when we get down to it, it's about a PR brand perception change where they want to be able to say and PR the fact that they've got a voice skill, which anyone who actually uses assistants are too smart to fall for that and actually will probably find it frustrating or a bad experience for just some sort of PR gimmick or something as part of a campaign. In terms of should voice at the moment, in my opinion, be used for some sort of interactive ad, it depends on your definition of what an interactive ad is, but I don't think people are going to find out that it even exists unless you buy some conventional media and push people to it. So I wouldn't advise using voice as a discovery tool or an ad placement. I think that if people are in a point of purchase, like they're in a store or they're using a web experience, I think there's an interactive conversational assistant that can help them at that point, but I wouldn't really call that an ad. I think that's more of a sort of purchase driving mechanic, and then that can be a point of discovery that, let's say, I've helped you find a pair of running shoes, I can also help you get running. That puts you into the ecosystem post-purchase, and then you've got the relationship with them. But in my experience, everybody thought that voice in B2C is going to be in this sort of pre-purchase awareness driving thing area, and that's going to make people think the brand's great, and they're going to have great conversations and then start buying stuff. It's just not true. It doesn't work, and people can't find them unless you spend a ton of money on conventional media. And why would you do that rather than just spend that media money pushing them to your product in the first place?
Just following on that last answer, what part of, so obviously using voice within an ad unit would increase the engagement, right? And like if you, in some measure, right, just the nature of it being conversational, you're engaging with the ad. So apart from I don't want to harp on making an ad unit, but I kind of think, well, I guess part of me is curious, A, if you have any metrics on, so forget about whether it draws people in, which obviously it doesn't because you have to talk to it first, but that's not the only thing that makes an ad interesting or good, right? There's stuff, whatever you get when you get there, right? And when you get there, if there's conversation in theory that it drives up the engagement rate, which drives up the purchase rate, et cetera. Do you have specific statistics on not whether or not it grabs eyeballs, but once they're there, does it actually result in purchase behavior more so than, let's say, traditional pre-roll or something of that nature? I just haven't seen any numbers.
I haven't got any comparable numbers that I can reel off to you now, but the closest thing we've done that's in that space is something we built for Westworld for HBO, where we built it's sort of the closest space to advertising that we've sort of got to, we built an AI assistant called Aiden that you could initially through a web portal, but eventually through voice, you could interact with it and ask about content around the show. So you could ask about characters and storylines and about the background to Westworld and have a conversational experience. We saw a massive peak at the beginning. In total, we had 1 million users use the experience. We had a massive peak at the beginning and then a big drop-off. But what we saw is that once people were in and they realized the content refreshed after each episode, and they were able to find out more background knowledge, and then it got onto Reddit and went crazy, we saw sustained use. And I think that is actually the measure when you're thinking about a conversation experience or a voice experience. It's repetitive use is what you should be looking for, not it's people coming back. That means you've made something valuable that they like rather than buying their attention, hindering their progress.
I guess, sorry. But so in theory, right, so that's like if the goal is brand recognition or brand awareness or whatever, what have you, right? Like, let's learn more about Westworld. But in theory, if the goal is purchase, right, you think it could be used in this way, right? Like somehow you'd obviously have to create conversational content that is somehow centered around purchasing things, but idea being that it could drive in that direction. Anyways, I don't want to harp on this.
Yeah, I think fundamentally that is the plan, right? Like if you get someone into a loyalty scheme, like a loyalty card, you're doing that so that they pick up points and keep coming back to use you. So I feel like that ultimately, and people are not stupid, like they understand that if they're getting good value from you through a voice experience or some sort of assistant that's helping them achieve a goal, you're doing that in the good faith that you're going to be able to drive more purchase. And if you can help more conveniently reorder something, so let's say I'm dealing with the diaper analogy again. So I'm getting advice on, I'm a first-time parent, I'm getting advice on hygiene and things related to childcare from this experience from like Pampers. It should be explicitly obvious that I can very quickly reorder, and because of context, it knows where I live and that I can get it the next day. So I think convenience for reordering stuff like that. I think when it gets to CPG products, that's easy to do in this space, but when you get into more luxury items, I think it will get more difficult. Like, whiskey brands, even like Moet, Hennessy, that kind of stuff. I think it gets more difficult for that repurchase through voice. I think it's part of the journey, potentially.
I just wanted to follow up. Ma'am, what was your name? Lori? I thought of one more thing. I see a lot of synergies. Like, I believe Apple should have went with beacons, low-power Bluetooth beacons for their pay. They would have wiped everybody else out instead of going to NFC, near-field communication. We're pitching a solution to an auto superstore. They put this thing on your car when you come in. You got a person that takes all your information. So inside this thing that's on the car is a beacon. So when it pulls into the stall, all of a sudden up on the screen, the mechanic gets everything he needs. Now with Alexa, he can interact and say, guess what? I found that the brake shoes need replaced. We need to call the customer. And if empowered, he could actually say, Alexa, call Susie, and Susie answers, hey, we found brake shoe issue. So that's another way to monetize, is synergy with other stuff that's out there. And again, I'm a huge fan of beacons for whatever reason. Somebody raised their hand. Oh.
I'm wondering your thoughts of, you're kind of getting grilled on, whatever Nike wants or whatever, but I kind of see it as they recognize the disruptive process, and they just want their foot in the game. They probably don't know what they want. They probably couldn't answer the question, probably worse than you.
Thanks.
I see it that way.
They want money.
not worse than you.
They don't want the brand manager in 2 years doesn't want to be asked, why are we not there?
Yeah, there's definitely an experimental component to why they're in the space. But I think one of the biggest things is the data that you get back. And like at the moment, most brands are getting data from like click-throughs or open rates, which what does that actually tell you? You kind of have to infer what people are thinking. Or you have to spend copious amounts of money on big expensive research agencies to do like dips every 12 months or whatever your company can afford. So to get more sort of qualitative information. So from I think from Nike side or all the brands we're talking to, I think the really interesting thing is the fact that you get much richer information back around the use of your product. So if like, let's look at an old school analogy like Michelin, right, that make tires. That's what they did. The link for me between the tire company and the restaurant rating is completely not there. I don't think about Michelin restaurants and think of tires, right? But if they did that nowadays and they were like, right, we make tires, that's our product, and we know that people like to drive places, we're going to put a load of ratings for destinations for them around food. And because it's now digital, we can tell how many times people who have bought our tires are traveling to these restaurants and back, in what weather conditions, what average distance, what average speed. But also because we're helping them pick the type of restaurants, we know the kind of things they like around that. So that should inform everything from supply chain, pricing, distribution, to your marketing, how you talk about the products and partnerships that you might put in place. That's, I think, a really big space to be, and it's just the beginning of getting a taste of that kind of data that we're getting back around how people are talking about skincare, what things they care around skincare. You can do some of that through search intent and Google search, but it's nowhere near as rich as the information we're able to get back around the relationship and then the ability to link things together that suddenly unlocks a new opportunity for products even.
What guidance are you giving larger brand retailers when they want to protect their customer voice data from the likes of Amazon?
From the likes of Amazon. We work with Amazon, so I've got to be super careful. Is anyone from Amazon in the room? Probably, I'm not putting a hand up. Right now, we don't personally hold that data from our side. The data is held by either Google or Amazon, depending on who we're partnering with. And then we're passing through the information through so we've built a SaaS platform that's middleware. That means you can build something for Amazon, and then we can put it into Google for you or put it into Facebook Messenger. And obviously, it's just through different adapters, and there is some functional change. But we don't hold any data. We just pass that through. And we leave it up to our client that we're working with to house that data in their cloud storage solution. So we're passing that through to them. But we don't have a guarantee at the moment that Amazon isn't able to harvest that information for their own good, or Google aren't either. So I can't promise them any of that. We make it very clear that we're not able to protect them from that information, and it's their choice to go and use this space. It's for their lawyers to work out how comfortable they are with doing that at this stage. I think it has when brands are considering what platform to launch on. I think if you're a brand that's concerned about its retail presence, you might lean towards Google perhaps. But then if you're a brand that wants to have bigger distribution, you probably lean towards Amazon because of the market share that it has at the moment. I think there's still a huge opportunity if you look at conversational experiences to look at Facebook as well. And given the context of what's happened over the last 8 or 9 months, you'd hope that there's some pretty strong structures in place with Facebook to protect personal data. I think it's unlikely they would not be doing everything they could right now to make sure the personal data is protected.
And speaking of that, the purchases that Facebook has made in the AR, augmented reality arena, we haven't heard much from them, but we're going to, I think. And what that looks like, I don't know.
So our skill, we're a B2B skill. Our skill, our goal is really to deliver a seamless experience, cooking experience through the shopping portion, the recipe discovery portion, and then the cooking itself. So we're sort of in easy right in front of we've done like Facebook Live demos, we've done flash meetings, and we're trying to
first.
Okay.
I think the answer to the first question about how to acquire customers is probably linked to the fact that you're already working with CPG brands. So they're your route to market. If you can give them enough of a reason to use point of purchase as a way to trigger, like the added value if I'm buying a cooking product, to be able to see a piece of POS that explains that I've got added value when I buy this product, which is a cooking utility that you've got, that's an interesting point for me. So it's in their interest, it's in your interest to co-market the fact at that point of purchase. That's where I would be looking to trigger that like drive in customer acquisition. They're already spending a ton of money paying retailers for shelf space and shelf wobblers. So why can't you be one of those? It changes what customers think about, should I buy this product or that product if they're comparable, I think.
Just to add on from the C side of it, the consumer side of it, an important marketing lesson is you want to be in the lake where your customers are already shopping or fishing or hunting, right? So, part of the acceptance, and you mentioned Facebook, I think that's probably one of the best drivers of consumer behavior because you can target, you could target your competition, you can target just about everything under the sun through Facebook ads. So that'd be one way to consider. As far as the B2B play, as you probably know, the best way I can help you is figure out how you can help your customers and become an integral part of that. Because you could care less, what I do for you. You want to make more sales. So what we do is something that the late Dr. Ellie Goldratt, the father of the theory of constraints, created called the bitch and moan session. I would want you to meet with your customers and say, tell us what's gone wrong. What are your customers wrestling with, and how does your cooking skill or acquisition of materials or whatever it is you're solving, how does it address that? Okay, my wife and I probably don't eat healthy enough, so we're probably a great suspect for you. Not a prospect yet, but a suspect. So, does it take, like in my area, we're from Ohio, one of the food chains has tried to take a page from Instacart, and now they're going to start delivering groceries in my area, right? So that's solving a problem we have, heartburn, getting to the grocery store. What heartburn is your company solving? To me, that's where you need to focus. Yes. I cannot. One of the advantages of being old is you've done a lot of stuff. So my background's hospitality, manufacturing, retail, development, and a lot of stuff, and my partner Tom the same way. So there's a lot of things we don't do. We don't do food and beverage. Don't understand how that works. I love to eat. I drink a little, but so again, it gets back, I said earlier, find what you're passionate about and figure out how to make money at it. Yeah, we're working on a skill to address that. One of the components is help I've fallen, and has anybody checked in with somebody? So we're doing a test case where, again, because Alexa can be conversational, that's the thing that we like about Alexa and the platform. We can do as deep a dive as we want because we're programmers, and we can program it now in PHP. So we can make Alexa do and say anything that's needed, and we love that about it.
We're doing a bit of work in healthcare at the moment. I think there's some stuff that's pretty clever that was done in the US that I read about recently for people elderly with Alzheimer's, who are going to ask repetitive questions that, as a carer, however caring you are, you're going to have burnout. But this is a really interesting way to just stimulate people constantly without this issue of repetition. I think that's interesting. In the UK, there's something that Amazon have done with the National Health Service that helped first-time mums with support and a question and answer experience for breastfeeding. They did a survey and found out that first-time mums they feel like they can't ask their parents or even the healthcare workers for support because they're going to be judged. But giving a 24-hour available question and answer type Alexa skill is super smart, and it seems to be doing really, really well. We ourselves are working with a university looking at a 3-year study with a group of 3 PhD students to work out the opportunities for a conversational experience to help with the medical adherence plans. So as you get older, you've got complicated issues. You might be dealing with type 2 diabetes as well as additional things like weight loss and liver disease. And cloud-based machine learning is probably a really applicable platform to help understand and identify your personal care needs and then pull together a personalized adherence plan to help you stay on track. So I think healthcare is absolutely an amazing fertile ground for using, both from a consumer perspective, like how can I live healthier, how can I have assistance with that, and also how can I get insights into what consumers actually need at what scale and what location. So I think it's a really interesting space, and if I was looking to make money out of moving into voice and didn't know how to enter it, I think that might be an interesting avenue to go all in on. I think it's a lot like what you said earlier around putting a beacon on a car and then the car automatically being able to the mechanic can just understand what's happening. I think voice experiences and assistance relating to healthcare will be able to infer early issues and predict stuff before you know that's an issue, and then your doctor can be alerted and you can have an appointment set up. That's all obviously like pie in the sky, thinking ahead, like doesn't happen yet, but there's no reason it can't. Like logically, it should work like that. It's just, are people prepared to give up that personal data? And in the US, the way your healthcare system is set up, it's all about money and people making cash out of that. And that is something where I feel like that's a barrier in the US versus Europe, where healthcare is free and people are more open to getting information because there isn't a commercial component they're going to lose out on. So I think where it comes to life will be interesting. Possibly, maybe you might look to China for something like this first, ahead of everywhere else.
We'll leave the politics at home. but
that wasn't a dig, by the way. I'm sure your healthcare is great.
But to follow up.
Well, wait a minute. You know why I say that? Because one time I did go to the doctor. One time I did go to the doctor, and I had an Android phone. And from the nurse, they came, whatever they do.
Sonogram, probably.
It came on my phone, and it's like, it comes like right on the phone, like you said, that phone stuff came right on the phone. So I could see what was going on inside the belly on my phone. But I'm saying, you know, like later on, when she had to go all the way up to St. Juan Hospital, when she lived in Newark. So say like if something else is going on, and that says the information is private, the person that comes to her house to do her diagnosis and stuff, all that information is private. It's like her own data. But I'm saying if they go a little further, so she doesn't have to go all the way back up to South already. You can say, Lexi, you know what, I got something going on with my teeth today. You call the doctor, or when that person comes to the house, they take all that information. Because what ended up happening is they had to send them to a foot doctor. But just say, here, let this.
Well, there's a better solution, and it's family. Again, my wife's a nurse, so she knows if somebody's diabetic, you have to look at their feet because that's where it usually shows up first. So if you notice your mom or your aunt or somebody limping, if you give them the proper access, you could alert the medical professions. I see mom's limping, what happened to her foot? And probably could have prevented something if you knew what to look for. So that's where I see another big win here, is Alexis making us smart about the things we should know about if they impact our friends and family. We got a partner if somebody has to have Google, if they have to have Alexa for business, you know, to control the devices, we got a partner for that. The only thing Tom and I want to do is the deep dive to make Alexa as smart as Jeff Bezos. Yes, yes, yeah. Yeah, B2C question?
No, that was B2B generally, only because of what you specifically
Ah.
are doing, validate looking at someone in Google space.
Hmm.
I make smartphones,
Ah,
so I have a very interesting model.
good.
So
Yeah, yeah, I'm happy. Companies, by the way, is Voice Metrics. I mentioned them earlier. My other session, Voice Metrics in Columbus, voicemetrics.io, Stuart and Paul. They're AWS certified, they're Alexa for Business certified, and they do Google. Tell them Ski sent you.
I'll follow up with you afterwards.
Okay. Any other questions? Did you want to add on to that?
No, cool. Thanks a lot.
I guess that's it. Thanks.